Hi, I'm Danny Hegler with Education USA, and I'm here with Patty Trent, the Director of International Admissions at Longwood University, and we're here to talk a bit about international students applying to the U.S. So Patty, there are over 4,000 institutions in the U.S. for international students to choose from. Do you have some advice on choosing a university for students?
Yes, Danny, I do. There are several categories that a student can consider when they're thinking about studying in the U.S. First, for example, is public versus private, and that's something international students aren't as familiar with. But a public school is going to be funded by usually the state government. It doesn't have any bearing on the quality of education, and there are many great schools in the United States that are publicly funded that students aren't aware of. They believe by their reputations they're private. Longwood University, my university is a public university in Virginia, so we are partly supported by the state, but we feel like a private school because of our size. We're a smaller university, about 4,080 students, so we can give you both the private school experience if you're looking for a smaller school with a public school cost. So that would be one thing to consider. The next thing to consider would be the size of the university and the location. Do you want to go to a smaller school? Do you want to go to a big school? Are you more comfortable in the city? Are you more comfortable in a smaller town? If you're looking for a very different experience in your education that you have at home, for example, you live in a more urban area, then you might want to choose a smaller area, smaller school, smaller town. That might be something that's different for you and would be a good opportunity to experience that. Another thing to consider when you're looking at a university in the U.S. is rankings. There are a number of different vehicles that are used to rank universities. For example, U.S. News and World Report, the Princeton Review, Forbes. These are all publications, major U.S. publications that rank universities in a variety of categories. Longwood University, for example, is ranked number 10 in the U.S. News and World Report for best master's level universities in the Southeast. There are lots of different categories, so you'd want to be able to check out the rankings of your school, and most schools will publish that on their website, or you can look at various ranking magazines to find that as well. You can Google it and find that out. And then finally, you want to look at location for your school. That might be something to consider. We talked about small and large size, but also where do you want to go in the U.S.? There are lots of, a lot of people want to go to the West Coast, to California, Florida, the Northeast, but there's a lot of other places in the U.S. that are interesting and afford additional opportunities for you besides just your academic schoolwork. Longwood, for example, is in the Mid-East coast. So if you might consider, where do you want to be close to New York City, to Washington, D.C.? Do you like to be close to the beach? Do you like to be close to the mountains? A lot of universities in the Mid-East of the United States can offer all of that. So Virginia universities, for example, you could be close to the beach, you could be close to the mountains for your activities during winter breaks and summer breaks, that kind of thing.
Wonderful. Well, thanks. And I know a lot of students don't think about location when they're looking at universities, so those are some really great points. Also, do you have some advice for students on the application process? So can you just quickly walk us through the application process to a U.S. university?
Sure. One thing that's important for students to know is that the process varies from university to university. So the first piece of advice is to go to the university website. And one of the things that international students don't always realize is that the link that they're looking for is the prospective student link. If there's not a direct link on the front page for international students, you look for the prospective student link, and that takes you to the admissions website, where there will be an international link for most schools that will offer the procedures and requirements for the application process. For most schools, they have online applications. There will be an admissions fee. And then the general requirements will be copies of secondary school transcripts, 4 years of the secondary school, the diploma, a copy of the diploma, and then for non-native speakers of English, they'll require the TOEFL scores, most schools, unless a student is attending an international school, and some schools will waive that depending on the number of years of English and perhaps their SAT score as well. So you're looking at TOEFL scores, you're looking at possibility of SAT scores, although not all universities require SATs of international students, so you'd want to check that out. A lot of students will ask about the GPA. Some universities will calculate your grades and take what your grades in your country on your transcript and do a calculation and come up with a grade point average that they'll use in the acceptance process. Some universities don't require that. They will just look at your grades within your educational system and make that decision based on those grades. Also, in terms of certified copies, a lot of schools will just allow you to have a translated copy, translated into English copy of your grades and diplomas that are certified, and then when you arrive, you might be asked to bring an original into the office to have copied for their files. But again, that varies from school to school, so you'd want to check that out. Finally, you have to submit a financial certification form, and the university will tell you how much it's going to cost for the year, an estimate for tuition, room, and board, and the U.S. government requires you to certify that you have that amount of money in the bank, and so that's a form that's usually submitted with the application as well. I did forget to mention that some schools have essays as part of their application and recommendations. Longwood has an essay as part of the application, but we don't require recommendations. So again, you just want to check out what each school requires.
Well, I think that's a really great point, that you need to check with each individual university and see what their requirements are. Sometimes we make generalizations, but you need to check with each university. So that's a wonderful point. Also, you mentioned the GPA, the grade point average, and I think it's important for international students to remember that in the U.S. we're constantly assessed. So we have all of these exams and all of these marks or grades that go into this final GPA. So it's a little bit different. So sometimes, students do have to have their GPA converted. So that's a great point. Also, I just wanted to ask, why should students study in the U.S.? I think it might be one of the most important questions that are beyond students' minds.
I think there are many reasons we may have touched on a little bit earlier, but first of all, the educational system is different in than in many countries. Most universities are going to offer liberal arts education. They're going to require students to take classes outside of their major area of interest to broaden their education base. And for some students, they really like that. So it gives you an opportunity to take courses in other areas, as well as those courses that are in your major. So it provides an opportunity that you might not have at home. Certainly gives you an opportunity to travel, and again goes back to picking the location, picking places in the U.S. that you might be interested to travel, and then you might be interested in the experiencing life in America, and in particularly if you're going to pick a smaller town, if that's of interest to you, I would encourage you to pick a university that maybe is in a smaller town, because you get to know people, the community much better than in the urban areas sometimes, and give you a real slice of American life.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, that learning doesn't stop in the classroom when you're somewhere else. Well, thank you, Patty. It was wonderful to hear from you today.
Thank you.